Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the G3000 as updated by good folks over at Workingtitle in early January 2023. Now, one of the interesting things about this modification is that when it first came out, it was a separate mod you had to download. Now it's actually integrated in all aircraft that have both the G3000 as well as the G5000. Let's get started. So first things first, when you take a look at this system, it's not too different from what you probably remember that the system was when the TBM 930 came out with flight sim back in 2020. Some of the big things that have changed when you just take kind of a quick glance at it is the fact that these panels have different color schemes. And usually when people see that first, they're like, oh no, colors, why would you? No, not really. Most people are like, oh, so it looks a little bit more authentic to what the actual system would be, which is what you probably want it to be. The good news about these particular systems is they're designed to be relatively straightforward and as intuitive as they possibly can be. And one of the reasons we like that is because if you're trying to change something like in a G1000, it only takes a few minutes to go ahead and identify the differences between those systems. So first things first, come down here. This is our primary flight display. This is really responsible for kind of giving us a general idea of what's going on. On your left-hand side, you're going to have your speed tape. This little item right here is going to be your indicated airspeed. Down here at the bottom, you have your Mach number. Obviously, we're in a TBM 930. We're not going to be going that fast. Swinging up to the tippy top, we have our current selected autopilot modes. You can see we're right now in heading hold. The autopilot is engaged. The yaw damper is engaged. We're in vertical speed. And this little white text, whenever you see white text with any type of GPS like this, or I should say autopilot like this, that's always going to be giving you a heads up of the fact that this is armed. So right now we can tell that ALTS, which is the selected altitude of 5,500, is armed and that we're currently climbing, hence the up arrow at 500 feet per minute. Now, for example, if I want to increase my vertical speed a little, let's say to 1,000 feet per minute, we're going to get there a little bit sooner, but that's not going to change my ALT setting. Now, if I were to come over here and go ahead and bop the flick button, flight level change, what's going to happen is the nose is going to pitch up quite significantly, but we're not actually going to have that much of a difference here because it's going to attempt to maintain that particular speed that we have selected there. Now, some people, of course, say, well, this isn't an autopilot tutorial. How do I change that speed? Well, if you come over here and actually tweak the vertical speed control, you can actually dial that in if it's just something you want to know. Pro tip. In here in the middle, we have ourselves our handy little display. This little thing right here represents our nose. This little yellow bar right now represents where our flight director is telling our automatic pilot to currently point this particular aircraft. Directly below that, you have your current heading. This is a magnetic heading. This thing will automatically update itself. You don't have to keep mashing the D key all the time. Don't worry about it. Over here on the left is selected heading, and over here on the right is our desired track. Right now we have nothing on course, so we don't have to worry about that. This is a handy-dandy little representation of our HSI, which we're going to go into a lot more detail a little later on. On the right here, if we have any selected item for a waypoint, of course notice the pink is going to represent that. It will give us details on that, as well as the current bearing to the target. On the right-hand side, we have our handy-dandy selected altitude. In this case, we're popping up to 5,500 feet. We have our current altitude tape. Obviously, you can see we're cruising up about 3,680 feet right now. And here's our current vertical speed. Notice we're using flick mode, so the vertical speed is going to fluctuate quite a bit. On the bottom, you have a couple useful pieces of information. You have your TAS as well as your GS. That's basically going to be your true air speed, and that's going to be how fast we're moving in the ground. Obviously, not too windy here. Over here on the right, you're going to have this handy-dandy button that says PFD map settings. Now, some people like to mash that button right away, but that's okay. The reason I don't actually recommend playing with that button is we're going to fix that a little later on with a handy display down here. But if you had to, you could come up here and turn the inset map, or you could turn the HSI map. I find this thing interesting, to say the least. But hey, everybody's different. Also notice once you've made that appear, by the way, you get a brand new set of options along the bottom here. We can, of course, reduce detail if it gets a little too messy there. And again, it's whatever works best for you. You can turn traffic on and off. Like I said, you can turn terrain mode to absolute versus relative. Relative means just tell me the terrain that is I'm about to smack into versus the actual terrain itself. You also have the ability to do some data link stuff. There's no data link here. Don't worry about it. We can turn the weather overlay on and off. Obviously, we're flying over London here, and the weather's crunchy, but there's no rain at this time, so we don't have to stress about that. And of course, if we want to shut it back off, we can just come up here and shut it off. It's going to become more important for us later on. Next item you're going to see along the bottom, like I said, is you have the PFD settings mode. Again, we'll take a look at that down here, but in the event that you're looking for sort of the short mode, you can actually come over here and play with these buttons. There's a couple kind of fun options. You have this split mode, which is a great way to lag your computer like crazy if I'd like to go ahead and bring that in. The split mode, by the way, works on all these different screens here. Some people really like this. I find it makes me a little insane, so I'm actually going to shut that back off. The other option, of course, is your attitude overlays, including synthetic terrain. I usually don't fly with synthetic terrain turned on. I know that seem scandalous to some people, but it chews up a couple extra frames. And in the real world, when I experience glass cockpits of the planes that I fly, I don't have it, even though it's really, really cool. Although the fact you can actually come down here and you can actually just turn on and off the horizon heading, and that's this little set of numbers that you can actually see here. That's really, really cool, and hopefully we get some of those other buttons later on too. Swinging off from here, we have two bearing options. So we have one, of course, for whatever our current computer is locked onto versus whatever we want to select. So if we had, for example, an ILS or something we wanted to dial in real quickly into that particular frequency, let's say we wanted to do 111 and we want to do 15 or something like that. Let's go set that in real quick. We'll do one of these, 11115. I got a new toy that gives me the ability to actually do these things remotely now, which is actually pretty cool. You can go ahead and dial that in. So swing it over to nav 1. And of course, if we were in range, which I think we're a little bit far out at this point, you would see the information displayed on that screen. Of course, you have another option over here on the right, which allows you to go ahead and dial in the AOA. You can turn that on or off. It's up to you. And of course, you can come over here and you can actually switch things into hectopascals. I got it right. Or you can do inches mercury, or of course, you can turn on the meters overlay too if you're traveling in places such as Russia. Obviously, make sure that matches whatever you need it to be. On the right-hand side, you have our OBS Selector. In this case, we're currently selected to the FMS. The FMS isn't doing anything right now because we haven't yet programmed it, but at the very least, you can kind of see exactly what it's doing. So if I switch this, for example, lock, this will be localizer 1. Obviously, we're a little out of range of this particular localizer, so we're not going to be able to pick this one up as our current distance, but it would give us the ability to swing that around. Keep in mind, if we're in nav mode and we start swinging that thing, you could have some autopilot disconnect issues, so just kind of keep that in the back of your head as well. To the right of that, we have the sensors option. There's a couple different things you can do in here. We have the ADC settings, which basically would allow us to choose what air data computer we're using. We don't care about that. We have the AHRS system. In the event that we had a gyro failure, we could switch to a different AHRS. The AHRS I get to experience on the flights that I do in the real world. A little less sophisticated than this, but it's still there. So swinging over to the middle page here, this is going to be kind of our MFD. This is our multifunctional display. This one's a little weird because you'll notice it has no usable buttons across the bottom. By the way, this is just a copy of this one in the event that you want to run them separately from each other. This is a really, really neat system. Over here on the left-hand side, you can have all the information about our engine. You can see right now our maximum torque percentage. You can see our RPM. You can see our gas generator. You can see our turbine temperature. If you have any error messages or anything, they'll also go ahead and appear down here. Over here on the left, of course, you've got current cabin pressure as well as rate. We're at 5,500 feet right now, so that should be pretty mellow, and it's pretty level. You have our fuel, and it'll also go ahead. Normally what it would do is put a little box around what fuel tank we're currently burning from. I can always just run my head down here and take a look that, indeed, we're coming out of the right tank. Swinging down from there, we've got our gallons per hour, which allows us to do some quick calculations if we need. Electrical system, all of our trims, as well as our flaps. Here in the middle, of course, we have our classic little moving map display here, and very, very useful. And of course, we have a traffic display. So this is when things start getting a little interesting. So now, in order to control this display, we got to go down a panel, and that's going to give you this little handy-dandy panel down here, which gives you the ability to tweak what you're doing. The way I'm thinking of it is this one right here controls these two screens, this one primarily controls this screen, and a little bit of this screen. You're like, what do you mean by that? Well, let me show you what I mean. If I were to come down here to the PFD controller, and let's say I want to switch my bearing on this one to nav 2, you'll notice that it's not going to do much of anything because of, like I said, the way this is connected. Now, if I come over here and start mashing this one, what I'll actually be doing is changing both of these screens together because of the way that this is currently set up, that these are not split screen. There is a mod available on the marketplace that allows you to run both these screens independent of each other if that's something you desire to do. So swinging down here, we have a couple different options. On the right-hand side, it's going to allow us to control what device we're currently using. If we're on the navigation communication radio, we just pop that button and it brings up a handy-dandy little page. Now, the reason I'm going to start with this one is this one's a little on the weird side. The first things first, if we just want to go ahead and dial in a frequency, stand by on Com1. Let's say we wanted to go 12000. You'll notice we have a couple different buttons here. We have the transfer button, we have the enter button. The enter button is going to lock it into standby. Now, if I do 12100, the transfer button is going to immediately pop it into our Com1. Now, you're probably saying, whoa, okay, that's a little different, but I could probably get used to that. It's kind of like a G750. It's like, yeah, you're not wrong. Now, when we want to do things down here, it gets a little more interesting. If I left click on this, you'll notice we get this little blue box around it, which now makes it selected. So let's say I want to do 122.7 here. I want to go ahead and do a quick transfer. 108. I thought I heard a beeping noise. That always makes me panic. 108.15, something like that. I can go ahead and leave that in there. Now, if I want to switch back to this one, I could come up here and click that real quick. One thing you can probably notice when I'm clicking between these two is the Com1 is always going to be shown up here in the upper left corner of this page, which makes it a little bit easier for us to spot. And you would think Com2 would be over here, but that's not actually how that works. Now, if we were to come down here and switch our mic to Com2, you'll notice that we got this little blue flash on it. And the other thing you probably notice is up here in the upper left corner, Com2 is now the currently selected radio. So one of the nice things they did for us in this aircraft is they let us know what our currently selected radio is just by looking up here, even if we've been fitzing around with it down here. Now, if I do something really chaotic like that, it's not going to make a difference because the one I'm speaking on is going to be always the visible one up here in case you start fitzing around. So if we wanted to monitor two at one time, that's not really going to mess us up. This is going to still be the one that we're talking on. To the left, you've got your transponder. If I click on the big 7000 there, you can go ahead and dial in your modes. Notice that you have to be in the correct mode in order to get the appropriate kind of air traffic visible here. So one of the things I tell people is don't forget to come in here into altitude reporting, otherwise you're not going to get anything. Down here with audio and radios, this is kind of fun on the real aircraft. Like one of the things I've learned recently is to really fitz around with this. But what you have now is the ability to turn on and off the different radios for listening to different systems. Now, the other page was probably a little bit easier for doing this, but this is actually pretty slick because I can come down here and I can turn down my marker beacon, I can turn my DME volume up, I can even see what frequency I'm on, I can come in here, I can actually click and change what mode it's on. So if you want to be extremely scandalous, you could actually come in here, hold a DME, and then be on two separate VOR channels. That's so awesome. And again, you have the options for co-pilot and passenger, but we don't get either of these because it's just us flying this plane. So they didn't bother modeling that. But notice everybody has their own set of radio controls. That's really cool. So coming out of the radio controls, we'll make our way up to the MFD panel here. There's a lot of fun things in here. This is going to be controlling this display. The first thing you want to see on here is if you come to the bottom right corner and you go ahead and give this a wiggle, you'll notice that you're changing the range of the currently left selected item. That's going to be the one that's got this blue box around it. So if I go ahead and push that in, that's going to give me the ability to pan this. It's actually really fun. I can actually come here, and if you grab onto this with your mouse, check this out. You actually have a little arrow that you can click and drag here and actually have fun with. So for example, if I went over to Echo Bravo Oscar Sierra and hold my mouse over that, you'd actually have the ability to press enter and actually grab onto that if we wanted to do. But we're not going to do that. But it is still a very, very handy way to kind of move your head around or move your little mouse around so you can see all the different options that are out there. When you're done having fun times with this, which is, like I said, kind of fun, you just come here, push that button again, and it'll re-snap back to your original plane there, which, like I said, what a neat feature that eventually I think we'll be able to get that a little bit fancier here. Now, one of the things you'll notice now is if I've got this little knob up here, if I sit and hold my mouse over this, do you notice how these two screens change here? So if I go to the right, I'm now selecting the traffic map. If I go to the left, I'm now selecting the navigation map. Now, the reason that's helpful, if I roll to the right here and I go ahead and adjust my range, do you see how I can change the range of my traffic display? So now I've got a 40 nautical mile display here. Now, if I swing back to the left-hand side, I'm basically grabbing back onto this one. Now, you're probably saying, what happens if I go 2 to the right? We can't go 2 to the right. Don't panic. The reason we can't go 2 to the right is, remember what I was saying when I click on the PFD? It's just like that. So let's go ahead and pop back over to my right panel here, and that's going to be my traffic display. There's a couple of things we can do. The first one, of course, I'm going to press this button to make it full screen, if that's something you want to blind yourself with. The other option, of course, is we can go ahead and click right here where it says traffic settings. When we push that, that's going to give us a lot of different modes. For example, we can flip it to standby if we don't want to make ourselves insane. We can make it so the altitude is either relative or absolute. It's up to you, and when I fly, I prefer it relative because I'd rather know that he's 5,000 feet above me or 0 feet above me than he's at 36,000 feet, and I have to sit over here and go work out the math real quick. It's just safer in my mind. The other thing, of course, you can do is you can change what range. We only want things above us, we want things below us, we want things that are kind of normal or unrestricted, leave it alone. Of course, you can also come in here, you can shut this off, and one of the fun tools here is you can actually create this motion vector. I don't have any traffic turned on to show this off, but what you would see is a little triangle with a line that would tell you the path that particular unit is going to be traveling 1 minute from now, which, like I said, is kind of a fun little trick here. So I'm going to go back to the main page here. I'm going to go ahead and switch back over to my left tab. I'm actually going to press the full display button. That's going to bring up everything. Again, there's nothing stopping us from coming over here, going traffic inset, and putting my little traffic display down here if I don't want to be looking at it. Like if I want a little mini display there and I want a little display. Like I said, I love avionics like this because they really are tremendously flexible and give you all these really, really good choices for it. So the map settings itself, you got a wide variety of things. Anybody's familiar with the other G products is probably familiar with most of these settings. One thing we can can do is we can change it to be a north up for those of you who are insane. We can also, of course, come in here and set it to track up, which is going to be pretty fair and allow us to see exactly where we're going. Map sync option here, of course, we can line these up if we want to. We can line them up initially. We can grab all the settings off of one map and copy it onto this one if you want. If you make a mistake, of course, you can always press the back button and come back from it. The map detail is exactly what you expect. You can crank down the detail, and which I think at this point you're not going to see anything. Yeah, you're just going to see a bunch of maps, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. So again, you can dial in as much detail as you need. In the real world, I hate cranking that detail level up that high. It's just really frustrating to work with because you get like roads and things, and you got to go in the settings and get rid of them and all that stuff. Coming down here, we have a couple other options too. We can turn traffic on. Again, this traffic is the same traffic as in the traffic display. The difference being is we'll see it on the actual map itself. Of course, we can access the settings here and set this exactly like we wanted to set it a minute ago. Next option we have is the absolute terrain button. This is kind of neat. Right now on current terrain mode, it's going to show us the terrain. Now, if I switch this to relative terrain mode, it's only going to show us the terrain that we run the risk of smacking into. So if I were to zoom out a little bit, you'll notice there's probably no terrain in this part of Europe that I'm going to smack into at 5,500 feet. I'd have to go a little bit further east towards like Austria and Switzerland in order to get a little bit closer to that. Inside of this, of course, you'll notice that we don't really have any good settings here. You can go ahead and define how far out you're looking at the terrain. And of course, you can even come in here and change the scale and put that over in the corner so you can see exactly what you can expect as far as that goes. Again, great little detail that they took the time to pop in there. So I'm a big fan of relative terrain in the mountains. I like absolute terrain when I'm navigating because it just makes it a little bit easier. Down here, you have the ability to turn on the weather radar. This is pretty straightforward. One of the things is that you probably don't need 500-mile range on it. But now that you've turned that on, if there was any weather that we could detect, you will actually see it as these little big square blocky bands that we'd actually be able to identify the individual components. Oh, there we go. Naturally, it's raining over in England. I just flew away from that. But at the very least, you can see exactly what that looks like. Inset window, we took a look at this already. Aviation mode, this is where we can go ahead and turn on all those doodads that are on our screen that are actually blinding us right now. So for example, if I want to shut off, let me go down a page here. Let me shut off intersections. Oh, it's so much better. You can go ahead and define all that stuff directly in here, turn things on and off. And of course, you can even define how far of your VORs are actually going to be appearing, which makes it very easy to really customize this display. Down here in other, we'll try that again. You have the ability to go ahead and dial in some key elements here. Like I said, this is a track vector. This is us. So if I actually zoom in a little bit, you'll notice I got this little arrow here. So you can see from 60 seconds from now exactly where my aircraft is going to be. Now, one of the fun things is if you have a really strong crosswind, your nose will point this way and the aircraft will point that way. Just kind of neat how that sort of a detail works itself out. Coming down here, of course, we have the weather. This is not the weather like you think it's the weather. This is actually the weather. So if I actually zoom out here, you'll notice that we can get a view that's giving us kind of weather optimized mode. So one thing I see people do sometimes is they'll actually split the screen so that they have one on the weather display and they'll have the other one. You can come over here and set this map display. So we have two different displays basically dedicated to where we are, but at the same time as it provides us with that kind of very, very similar information here. Again, great. We don't have TAWs. Oh well. So below all that, of course, we're going to get down to the fun parts. And this is where we're going to handle our flight plan information. So for example, let's go ahead and do a direct to real fast. Again, this is all touch screen, so we can make it very, very simple here. We'll do LFPG, that's a CDG for me. Press enter. It's going to go ahead and say, do you want to do that? I'm going to press the activate button. And you can see we've got ourselves a new heading. And of course, we can come up here and switch on the navigation hold mode, which is going to make the aircraft take a right turn in a minute and start taking us directly over there. There we go, on the way. So now that that's all set, we can go ahead, of course, and see the flight plan page itself. Right now, we're heading towards Charles de Gaulle. This would give us the ability, since this is a direct waypoint, we can actually come up here and have a lot of fun with this and tweak all sorts of settings and things like that if we wanted to, depending on what we're trying to do. One of the things you'll notice on the left side of the active flight plan is you got this lovely proc button, which is going to allow us to select our particular approaches on arrival should we need a specific one. So just as an example here, I could come here and click this. For some reason, it's a grab EBFN. I'm not sure why I did that, but that's okay. LFPG, something on my part. Oh, I know why, because I didn't define where I was going to go. So here we go. We have all our different options here. I have no idea. I just pick one kind of randomly. Let's go pick that one randomly. We can hit the load button, and in a second, what's going to happen is all that information is going to come flying in here. And until we come down here and actually activate everything, we're not going to work. The bottom left corner, you're going to have the ability to go ahead and show your flight plan. So I can actually click that button. And you can see very clearly exactly what my flight plan itself is going to look like through the absolute chaos. I actually did an okay job picking that particular one. And of course, like before, we can rename the flight plan, we can delete it, we can even edit the data fields, which I find kind of scary if you ask me, but you can actually go in here and tweak that. All that's going to do is it's going to change what these two numbers over on this side are, which is going to give you a pretty effective kind of item like this. Now, some of you are probably saying, hey, what about that VNAV option at the bottom? Could you tell us about that? Well, the VNAV is a little involved, and I actually have a separate video that explains it because it takes a little bit of time to kind of go through it. Down here on the right, of course, you have the proc button, which is procedures, which is exactly the same as it was before. One of the nice things is we can come in here, we can pick it. That's already been preset. I'm just going to load it. So now, not approved for GPS. That's fine. So all that's been pre-programmed, and now we're ready to rock as far as all the approaches into LFPG goes. Coming down here with the aircraft systems options, a couple different buttons here. Let me zoom my head out just a little bit. I'm actually going to go to full display here to make it a little easier. But if I press the fuel button, it actually brings up a page dedicated to the fuel. So we can actually see exactly how we're doing. Apparently we have minus fuel remaining. Silly on my part, I guess. We also, of course, can bring up handy dandy little electrical power page, which lets us know how we're doing. Looks pretty good. We have a general page, kind of gives us a heads up of what's going on with the aircraft. We have a weight and fuel page, which is really neat because we can actually come in here and define exactly how much fuel. I'm actually going to press FOB sync, and it will actually grab our current weight. So we can actually come in here and dial in all of our fuel details and work it out before we even take off. And the last item, of course, is your lighting configuration. So if you needed to, you could click and drag on this, and you can make everything a little dim. I find it interesting the auto button's not here, but that's just sometimes kind of how that goes. So coming down here at the bottom right, now we have the utilities option, a couple different pieces in here. One thing we can do is we can take a look at the GPS. We can also go to status, and we'll go to avionics settings. This is where you can do things like define all your different headings. You could do true versus magnetic if you wanted. You could change your items into metric and kilometers and kilometers per hour. All those options are going to be built in here. The other thing, of course, you can do if you want is you can come in here, you can define things like what all these numbers at the top are. For example, you'll see MFD data bar right now is ground speed. Maybe I wanted fuel on board or something like that. Again, I don't know why I'd want that, but you can come in there and change these different items across the top. Again, something that needs a save button. So once you set it up, you're good to go as far as everything else goes like that. So I can hit back. It'll take me there. Hit back one more time, back one more time. And then on the bottom, we have a couple last-minute items here. And these are the last ones we look at today. The first one's going to be your speed bugs, which if we wanted to, we could come in here and define key speeds. So let's say we're coming in for approach speed, and let's say it's 85 knots. When I do that, if I were to come down here to 85 knots, you would actually see a little marker on here that would say VAP on it to act as a general reference for me. You can shut those off. The other option you're going to see when you come down here is you have waypoint info, which is really cool because you can actually come in here and do some really silly stuff like creating your own waypoints. Or what you could do is you could go to the airport and get all sorts of information about frequencies. Now, one thing I really like with this is if I go to Navcom on the right side, let's say I wanted to pre-arm this, I can actually click that frequency, and you can even go like this and instantaneously jam that frequency into your radio so you don't have to sit there and kind of fitz around with the different buttons trying to identify exactly what you need. Again, if this isn't a marketing for this product, I don't know what is. I feel like I should get it cut. It's such a good system. All right, going back here. And then, of course, you have the nearest option. So if something bad happened, I could come over here, press the airport button, and I could see who the closest airport is. I could click on it and go ahead and show it on the map so we could go ahead and take a look at where it is relative to us. And in a panic, of course, we can make ourselves a direct to and fly right over to that aircraft and land on it right away, which would be nice and safe on our particular part. So as you can see, there's a lot of really nice things in it, and it's actually relatively simple to use. How you set it up is going to be kind of up to you and kind of what you're using it for. As a general rule for me, over on the left-hand side, I like to kind of keep it basically like this because everything that I need is pretty much right in front of me that I'm probably going to have. I don't like to put an extra map down here. I find that gets a little confusing. On this side, what I like to do, of course, is I like to go ahead and keep it really simple and just have my regular moving map display. I'm a huge track up fan as opposed to a north up fan, but again, one of the nice things is they actually programmed it. So if you zoom out far enough, it should, it doesn't let me do it. I didn't program it properly. When you pass a certain zoom level, it actually switches north up mode. And the other thing, of course, on this side, since these two agree with each other, I'm not going to worry about it. The other thing I usually do as far as workflow goes is I like to keep the one on the right as my radios, and the one on the left I like to keep as any of my settings that I want to use. But other than that, a pretty solid system, and the best way to learn it, of course, is to play with it a lot. But otherwise, hopefully this overview is helpful. Enjoy.